Here we thank you for those that have come and gathered in your presence. We are gathered in your name, Lord. We are gathered here to learn and to hear and to, Lord, have understanding, God, of your word. We do ask this evening that you would direct us, that you will anoint us and help us to minister, Lord, the word in an effective way. God, give understanding. Open up hearts and minds here tonight, that there may be an understanding, Lord, of the Scriptures, and that we might thereby draw close to you. God, you have given us so much that pertains to our hour. You've given us things that pertain to history. Lord, the veracity of your word has been proven time and again. You are a faithful God. Your word is true. And indeed, as heaven and earth will pass away, your words will never pass away. And we thank you for that we have such, Lord, a sure foundation, something, God, that we know will stand the test of time. Help us tonight, Holy Spirit. Help us in this place. Teach us. In your wonderful name we pray. Amen. 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 Okay, I have got quite a bit of ground to cover. I'm only going to say just a little bit. If you were not here last week, I guess that's available? Okay. So get with Noah, and he can tell you if you did want to connect what we did study on last week. Well, you go ahead and open up your Bible. I'm going to give just a few seconds of review. You get your Bible open to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21. That's where we're going to start here this evening. I made the case last week. We just spent a little bit of time making the case for why I believe the prophecy in Luke 21 and the prophecy in Matthew 24, 25 are two distinct prophecies. I don't like to say different in the sense because they do have similarities to them. They do cover some of the same information and the same time period. But there are too many differences in them to have them be the same prophecy. So I believe we looked at some reasons as to why we believe they are distinct prophecies. Given that, the way we're going to consider them is I'm not going to try to blend them. Although we will have some repetition, and that's okay. So when we get to Matthew 24, there'll be some things there that we're going to be talking about that has been mentioned in Luke 21. That's okay. The repetition won't hurt us. We're just going to start with Luke 21 because it's the first one given in time, and it makes sense to have a good understanding of that before you get to Matthew chapter 24. We then looked at the occasion. Some of the events, what was the atmosphere, what had been going on leading up to this time that Christ gave these prophecies. This is what we call the Passion Week. We looked at where that came from. And the Passion Week being basically the final week of Christ prior to his crucifixion. It's called the Passion Week. And we get that term from Acts chapter 1, and we shared that with you last week. We talked about, again, the events that have been going on and leading up to this, and what would therefore have been the mindset of these men, the disciples. And you will remember, we covered this on Sunday, that when they were coming into Jerusalem, when Christ was coming into Jerusalem, they were crying, "Hosanna, King of Israel, Hosanna." And Hosanna means save us or save me. It's the idea of save us. And the salvation they wanted was a political salvation, a political freedom, not a salvation from sin. That's not what they were looking for. They were looking for a king to come and reign in righteousness, and Israel would be restored to its place and be free from the tyranny of Rome. This is what they're looking for. And to get that kind of mindset, that's the mindset also that the apostles have. They've just proclaimed Christ king, and he's received it. He has received it. He has not said, "Oh, don't call me king. I'm not your king." No, he is their king. And he will be crucified, and the crime that will be placed on the placard on his cross will be Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. This will be his crime for being king. But he was king, and he received that adoration from the people. But he does not become the king that they, in this sense, that they had expected him to be. And so we wanted to make sure we understood the mindset of these men so we could put this prophecy in its proper setting and the audience and what they would understand. And then we started looking at the prophecy itself, the temple prophecy. So that's kind of just where we were last week, and we talked about, again, quite a bit of stuff. So you'll and I don't have time to recover all of that. So what I want to do tonight is take your Bible, Luke 21. I want to begin, the prophecy actually begins in this scenario in verse 5. I'm just going to begin there. Verse 1 through 4 gives this business, it's an interesting connection when you see what Christ has warned them of in the last part of chapter 20 about the scribes who devour widows' houses. And you can see one way they do that because he's sitting there and illustrates that. He's sitting in the court, which had been the court of the women where the treasury was, the silver trumpets, and all these rich men coming and casting in their money. But here is a poor widow giving her last mite. What we don't often see, we talk a lot about what she did, and Christ did. He commended her for her giving. But when you take it in its context, the fellows he had just got done talking about devour widows' houses. And one way they did that is they would not use their funds to help this widow. They will give their offering to the temple. Not that that was bad, but it became more of a display. Their giving was a display instead of giving from the heart out of a love of God or out of a desire to worship the Lord in giving. Because the real giving that God would have liked them to do is not to be enriched, but you got this widow coming into this temple. Why aren't you helping her? You got plenty of money. They had plenty of money. Why aren't you helping this widow? And in that sense, they were devouring. And then Christ, we begin at verse 5. So I'm going to start at verse 5, and I'm going to read down through verse 24. And then we're going to go back, Stu, and we're going to start talking about that tonight. So let's just read. Listen, follow with me, Luke 21 and verse 5. And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones. I'll get here in a moment. Matthew and Mark records, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. Disciples came to show him the buildings of the temple. And here it's the temple and how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts. So this idea was that it's not just, there was two words for the temple. Let me check here real quick which word this was. I wanted to make sure of that. The temple, because there are two words that are used for that. Hieron. Okay. So this word here is used for the central building. So there were two words that was used in the New Testament. One dealt with the central temple building that only the priests could go into, where you had the holy place. That was the temple proper. And then there was another word used for the temple, which included all the complex. And so from the Matthew and Mark's Gospels and putting them together, because the question is the same, that they're talking about the entire complex, not just the temple itself, because then you have the temple, then you have the walls that surround that, the courtyards, and then the entire complex. There's the court of the Gentiles, the court of women, and then the men could go beyond that, and then into the temple building proper itself and the courtyard that surrounded that building. So they're looking how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts. There were nations that would send gifts to this temple to adorn it. It was a massive, massive structure, beautiful. He said, this is what Christ says, as for these things which ye behold, the days will come in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? And he said, take heed that you be not deceived. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified. For these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by, or straightway, or immediately. Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. But before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinfolk and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But there shall not a hair of your head perish. In your patience possess ye your souls. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land. The word distress there means necessity, great necessity, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now let's deal with this section tonight, and let's see if we can get an order to this. Let's kind of flow. Now we spent some time here last week, so I'm not going to spend as much time with that tonight, because we did spend some time in some of these early verses. But so they come, Christ, they're leaving the temple. They're impressed with the building of it. And let's put in mind here and remember, this very temple is the temple that Jesus has called Father's house. And just a few days prior to this prophecy, He cleansed it. He cleansed the outer court of the temple. Got rid of all the bleating of the sheep and the noisy mess, the doves and the money changers and the bartering and the bickering that was going on. It was like a market, but it was in the temple complex. And you had to pass through that area to get into the place where you would pray and seek God. And it was a mess. You're all distracted by that. And Jesus cleared all that mess out. So He has cleared this, and He calls it Father's house. He has come to this temple. He has fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament in doing this. And so they are looking at the beauty of this temple, to which Christ has made claims and connections. And they're just, they're good about this. This is wonderful. Look how beautiful this is. And Jesus tells them something that's going to rock their world. The days are going to come when not one stone is going to be left upon another. It's going to all be thrown down. Well, and then they ask Him immediately. And they ask two questions. When is that going to happen? And what is the sign? Well, He's going to answer those two questions. The sign He will give them when it's going to happen. But when it's going to happen in terms of a date, exactly, He does not give them that. But He does give them a general sense in which this is going to happen, and the sign by which it's come to pass. And we'll be looking at here in just a moment. So in His answer, it's quite interesting. When Christ answers these two questions that are asked here, when and what's the sign? What sign and when? He starts with this: take heed that you be not deceived. And He does this on the occasion when they come later and ask Him further questions on the Mount of Olives. When we get to Matthew, we're going to see the same thing. That He doesn't immediately answer this. He draws their attention to focus on something. He says something else first. And this lets us know, because Christ says this first, that this is This is something that's paramount in his mind. It's something that they need to keep in the forefront. The powers of deception are strong. And I'm telling you that in our day, I think they're stronger than ever. And deception is not decreasing, it's increasing. And the methods by which that Satan has to do that with are increased in this day and hour. AI is giving the enemy a big tool to use to deceive people, because people are getting used to going to the computer for their answers. Instead of going to source documents, instead of going to the Bible, instead of going to God's Word, people go to AI. And it's already been found that AI, depending upon who writes the programs, it's prejudiced. There's bias within the AI. And so there's deception is increasing. And here becomes a focal point for them. And he tells them that there will be this many coming in his name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near, and go not therefore after them. We see this same sense of focus of Christ when he finishes the Sermon on the Mount. He gives us this beautiful portrait of the kingdom, or principles of the kingdom, the laws of the kingdom. And we get to the end of this, and what does he say? Beware of false prophets, men who are wolves in sheep's clothing. You will know them by their fruits. And then again, he uses that many. For many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not, in thy name prophesied things? And so you see this same kind of emphasis here that Christ is placing at the end of his days. And so men will come in my name saying, I am. The word Christ is in italics, but saying, I am. And this is, again, this is not so much a warning. It would certainly, I think, include that. But I don't think the chief warning here is against men. We talked about this last week, coming and saying, I am, believe in me. Well, if you're really a person that's seeking truth, you've got to be pretty far gone. I mean, if you know anything about the Bible, you're pretty far gone if you will look at a man and say, oh, you're the I am, I'll take that, I'll believe that. Really? He's aging, he's dying, it's like everybody else. I don't think so. The problem, we don't have, it has happened. And even today, there are men who still claim to be Messiah. There have been through time false messiahs. But they don't generally gain a large following. The larger following comes from men within the ranks who point and say that Christ is the I am. They point to Christ and they come in His name and they say that He is the I am. And the confusion in Christianity is not so much false messiahs, but false men who claim to know the Messiah. That's where the greater problem comes from. And so the time draws near, go not therefore after them. There's something with this. When you see this increase of deception, take heed, guard yourself against deception, because there's going to be this increase of men coming and bringing deception, and the time is drawing near. So this deception is going to grow as we get closer. But when you will hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by, or it's not immediate, it's not right yet. So these are a couple of general things that are going to be signs leading up to the end. But he said, this is not necessarily an indication that the end is right there. So these things are going to be going on leading up to the end. Now there's a bit of a shift from here to here. And then he says to them, and he expands a little bit. You have nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. This is war. Earthquakes in divers places, famines, pestilence, natural disasters, fearful sights, and the great signs there shall be in heaven. So you have problems on earth, on this planet, and problems in the heavens, the atmosphere around the planet. And then he comes to this verse, becomes a kicker. But before all these, and I think this refers back to here, not so much to here. before all of these. So you're going to see these things that are going to take place. But before we really see this nation against nation playing out and kingdom against kingdom and these great earthquakes, something else is going to take place. Now these general things are going to take place from the get-go. And though some of this is happening, it's not happening and going to happen after the day of Pentecost. It's not going to happen in a major way because Rome has still brought the world under its thumb. And so, yes, there are some uprisings within Rome. We're going to talk about the one with the Jews tonight. There are uprisings within the empire of Rome. But the nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom is going to be something yet more future. And yet Christ tells them about it first. I find that interesting. He goes through here. I want you to see this. Now, why does he go to this first? And then it's like he backtracks. But before all these. Now, why does he do that? I think one of the reasons is he wants them to not get lost in the signs. General things are going to happen. And this is kind of a toughie because they're there, they're ready for Christ to bring the kingdom to Israel, and Christ says, there's going to be more wars. Because they understood this was prophesied in the Old Testament. Isaiah talks a lot about it, Ezekiel talks about it. The age they were looking for, the messianic age that would be introduced by the Messiah, was an age of peace. Isaiah talks a lot about it. Chapter 2, chapter 11. I mean, the wolf and the lamb playing together. The child playing on the hole of the ass. Zechariah talks about it. The children playing in the streets. And, old men at peace and that sort of thing. And here Christ is saying, guess what? You got a future of conflict ahead of you, not peace. That's got to be troubling. That's got to be, wow. Well, it's not so much for now. We're 2,000 years. We understand. We've seen the wars. We got 2,000 years of history. But put yourself in these guys' shoes. And that's a pretty tough place things to listen to. So now at this point, giving them, hey, make sure you stay true. And no matter what happens, don't be deceived. You're going to hear of a lot of commotions, wars, things. Don't be terrified. These are going to come to pass. But the end is not immediate. These are general things that are going to happen. And then he'll add on to that, these things are also going to come. Don't let these things trouble you. But before all these, now he's going to really go back and deal with the questions. Before all these, and he says, even before these things take place, you're going to have something. They're going to persecute you, deliver you up to synagogues, in prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. Now this is going to immediately happen, or not happen, I say immediately, in some years after the day of Pentecost. Why? Let me explain that to you. So we have the day of Pentecost, and for some time, a period of around, I don't know, depends on how folks put that together. I think, if my memory serves me right, 3 to 7 years, somewhere in that time frame. The church enjoys a time in which really they don't have great persecution. Now the apostles get in trouble a little bit for preaching and teaching the name of Christ, but as a whole the people don't. Until Saul gets in the picture. And when Saul gets in the picture, and Stephen is the first man killed, and Stephen is killed in Acts chapter 7, and then Saul begins a great persecution. Now, why do I say that this, in this particular context, deals with them? Why? Because they would deliver them up to synagogues, and that's what would happen. So this was a Jewish context. You're going to be brought before kings. You're going to be brought before rulers. You're going to be delivered up to synagogues. If they're bringing you to a synagogue, this is Jewish persecution. It's not happening in our day. Not this persecution. We have persecution. We'll probably see that more in Matthew. But this persecution is pertaining to this audience that's listening to this. They're going to be brought to synagogues. They're going to be put in prison. Saul will do just that. He will do. He will go in and he will bring them, deliver them up for judgment before leaders and synagogue, brought before kings. He himself, Paul, will go later before kings, but they will be brought before them for a testimony. And it shall turn to you for a testimony. So he gives them instruction about this. Settle it there in your hearts. Don't meditate before what you will answer. I'll give you what to say, basically, and your adversaries will not be able to gainsay or resist. Did that not happen with Stephen? What was Stephen? He was brought before synagogues, wasn't he? He was brought before that crowd. There were a couple synagogues that raised up, the synagogues of the libertines and others, and they're nailing Stephen to the wall. But guess what? The Bible said they looked to him, his face was like an angel. They couldn't resist it. His wisdom is too great. Now, this idea, they could not answer his wisdom. The only thing they could do is kill him, because they can't answer his arguments. They can't answer what he has given unto them. The only thing they can do is take his life out. And this is exactly what's going to happen within a few years after Pentecost. And he said, you'll be betrayed by parents, brethren, kinfolk, friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. So not everybody's going to die, but some of them is going to die. You'll be hated of all for my name's sake. And there would be a hatred that would begin from there, and it would go and spread throughout the Roman Empire. And it doesn't, by hated by all doesn't mean that each and every individual, but typically by nations and territories within the empire. And he said, there will not be a hair of your head perish. That's that concept about the hairs of our head being numbered, not counted, but numbered. Here's the deal. When you belong to God, every bit of you belongs to God, your entire body. And whatever they do to abuse you and beat you, and he says, I'm telling you, I will judge for everything. If you lose one hair to them, I've got that hair numbered. It might be hair number 556. See, God doesn't have as much problem with me because I don't have as many hairs to number. But some folks got a lot of hairs to number. We're not talking about the counting of hairs, but talking about the numbering of hairs. And he says, your hairs will not perish. I will take care of you and see that justice and vengeance is mine. I will repay. In your patience, you will acquire your soul. You will acquire your life. In your perseverance. And the idea is you're going to suffer persecution. You're going to go through difficulties. I will give you what to say when you're brought before people. Don't worry about what to say. I'll give it to you. And he said, I will take care of you. If you even lose a hair, they'll pay for it. I will see that justice is done on your behalf. But it's in your perseverance. You've got to go through it. You've got to persevere. You've got to make it through to the other end. Don't give up. Don't quit. You will acquire your life. You will win the day. You will come out on top, and you will gain your life if you persevere. Matthew will say, he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. This is the perseverance of saints. And it's not just a principle then, it's a principle now. Folks, you've got to endure your trials. You've got to go through them. You got to finish the course. You give up. You can say, I lived a great life for God for 50 years. I only turned away the last year. Sorry. If you give up the last mile, you don't finish the race. You don't get crowned. You've got to cross the finish line. You've got to persevere, and you've got to see this thing all the way through. Then, now he's going to get to the sign. Now he's going to come to this sign, and he's foretelling the destruction of Jerusalem. And the destruction of Jerusalem will also bring the destruction of the temple that they have asked about. So it's not just when he gives them this, they're going to understand it's not just the temple that's coming down, the entire city is coming down. And so here's what he says, and we'll focus here the rest of the evening. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know the desolation thereof is nigh. Here's the sign. How do they know when the desolation, if it's a kind of a law of deduction here, because they've asked about the temple and the buildings. Well, if Jerusalem, the city, is destroyed, the temple's going with it. All right, so the temple destruction is not just the temple, it's tied to the city's destruction, desolation, made empty, desolate, in that sense. So the sign is when Jerusalem is compassed with armies. When you see armies gather around and set up shop on the outskirts of Jerusalem, basically coming against it, it's not going to be too long, and it's coming down. The siege of Jerusalem will actually last about 5 months, and it will come down. We're going to talk quite a bit about that tonight. I want to give this what's happening here, and then I want to give some history about it. So what does he tell them? When you see that, if you're in Judea, so he speaks first to Judea. Now Judea is the region in which Jerusalem is. Jerusalem is the city, but Judea is the region around about the city that they dwelled in. Remember, this is where the ministry of Christ, where the gospel would first be preached, in Jerusalem, first in Jerusalem, then Judea, the area around Jerusalem, and then in Samaria. Let's go a little bit further north of that Judea, and then the uttermost parts of the earth. So he says, if you're in Judea, if you're not even in the city, but around it, head to the mountains. And then that are in the midst of it, if you're in the city and you're in the midst of Jerusalem, get out of it. Get out of it, he said. And if you're outside, don't go to Jerusalem. If you're in the countries around, or the regions around Jerusalem, don't go to Jerusalem. Now, there's a pile of them that they didn't know this and didn't listen to this, all right? But even the days before that. For why? Because these are the days of vengeance. These are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. And he says, woe to those that are with child, to those that give suck. You have a nursing child in those days. For there will be great distress or great necessity in the land. I'm going to read you something about that in a little while. And wrath upon this people. They'll fall by the edge of the sword. They'll be led away captive to all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. We are still right here today. In some measure. Jerusalem is still, there's this mosque sitting right in the middle of that place. And you know what? The Jews still don't have full control of that. There's still a Gentile presence in that city. And Jerusalem is trodden down, but it is coming. It is coming to a close. And really, that is really not going to be, Jerusalem is really not going to be brought back to the place where it's supposed to be until Christ returns to the earth. When He returns to the earth, He'll cleanse it. It'll no longer be other nations having it. The King, Christ Himself, will sit within that city. And He will rule from Jerusalem. So what I want to do is I want to talk about this. And some of this will become a little bit more apparent. The destruction of Jerusalem in the year AD 70 was a major, major event. Now, let's just talk a little bit about the time period here, and so you can get some kind of perspective leading up to that. Just a few things. So we have Pentecost coming around AD 28, somewhere in that time frame. Christ being born around 4 BC. Our calendar is off about 4 years. So Christ, they think, somewhere between 4 and 6 BC, Christ was born. And they take that now, our calendar, because there's certain things we can know because about Herod and other records that have been found. We know exactly when some of those events in reference to Christ took place because of the Herods and when they died and certain things that happened. We can track that. We have other historical records, archaeological records that will help us better date. And so when the calendar was set up, they found out later it was off 4 years, and they never changed it. So Christ was born, according to our calendar today, around somewhere between 4 and 6 BC. Pentecost, of course, Christ ministered for what, 33 years or so. He lived for about 33 and a half, give or take, somewhere in there. So it's somewhere in 28, 29. We can't be exact with this, but we're close. Somewhere in that time frame, AD 28, 29 is when Pentecost occurs. This will be when Christ, of course, is crucified, and then Pentecost is going to take place, the church's birth, and then they begin to spread. So just for sake of round numbers here, if we can, let's just say AD 30. It's a few years before that. So there's about 40 years, give or take, between Pentecost and the destruction of Jerusalem. That's a generation, if you will. That's a generation of people. You can have, in 40 years, you can have grandkids. If you're born at the start of that time period, You can grow up, you can start having kids, and they had children young, start having kids when you're 20. They grow up, 18, 19, they have children. You could be starting to have grandkids at 40. We're talking about one generation here and starting another generation coming. So about 40 years. What's going to happen in that 40 years? Well, in that time, of course, the city is going to, God is going to bring the gospel to Jerusalem. The Spirit's going to fall in Jerusalem. The gospel is going to spread out from there. The first church, the mother church of all churches, will be Jerusalem. And that will be the only church for several years. They did not just come to Jerusalem, get saved in the day of Pentecost, and go out and start spreading the word and build churches. They did not. They stayed. The apostles, the Bible says, those that got saved, they continued in the apostles' doctrine. And the apostles stayed in Jerusalem. That means the people had to stay in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem got a ton. First of all, they got the witness of the Spirit poured out. They got the witness of the gospel. And they had a ton of preaching in that city. And a lot of Christians. At one point, they had 5,000 men, it mentions. Acts chapter 5, I think it is. 5,000 men that are a part of the church. It's a tremendous move of God. And then, of course, Saul's going to raise up 6 or 7 years later or so, and they're going to have this persecution that comes, and then the church people scatter, and when they scatter, they preach. And then the gospel is going to Samaritans. It's going to eventually make its way down to Antioch and come into Gentiles. And then from Antioch, we're going to get the first missionary team that goes out, Paul and Barnabas, and it's going to start into Asia Minor, through the regions of Galatia and Asia Minor in that region. And Paul will have 3 missionary journeys that were recorded in the book of Acts. The city of Jerusalem has not been destroyed when the period of Acts has finished, or the book of Acts is concluded. So everything in the book of Acts happens before AD 70. Everything. The book of James will be written. Galatians will be written. 1 Corinthians will be written. 2 Corinthians will be written. While Paul is in prison at Rome, we will have Ephesians. We will have a large Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians will be written. Philemon will be written. Really, all of the books of the New Testament are going to be concluded, with maybe the exception of John's Gospel, may come a little bit later, and the book of Revelation will not come until after the destruction of Jerusalem, and some of John's epistles. But the bulk of the New Testament will be written prior to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. So, I think probably so. Probably written, yes, before the destruction of Jerusalem, because there's still a strong Jewish contingent drawing the people back. So it's probably in the 60s, somewhere in the 60s, that Hebrews will be written. Now, also before the temple or the destruction of Jerusalem, the apostles will have been gone. Of course, the first apostle to get killed was who? James. James was the first one, and where's that at? Yes, okay. But what book? I'm sorry, book of Acts. What chapter? Acts chapter 12. James is killed in Acts chapter 12. All right. Paul will die. Peter will die early 60s. Paul will die probably a little bit later than that, somewhere in the 60s. In a few years before we see the destruction of Jerusalem, they will be in Rome, of course. They will not see the siege. They will not see the things go on. So they will not see the destruction of their beloved city. So Peter and Paul will be dead. The apostles will be scattered throughout the world. They will not be left in Jerusalem. James, who was the leading elder, he will be thrown off the temple. So he is obviously dies before the temple was destroyed in AD 70. So this is James, the brother of Jesus. So several of the apostles, John will still be alive when Jerusalem is destroyed. Because John lives until the end of the century, and he dies a natural death. But the bulk of probably all the other apostles have already been martyred, or they definitely have left Jerusalem and went to other parts of the earth to spread the gospel. They did go. Some went to India, down into Africa. So the apostles, when they do finally leave Jerusalem, they will go out. We have to take that from historical records or tradition. really, it's not so much historical record, just tradition as to where these men went to when they left. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what goes on. We get to this year. I want to talk about this man. Let me get over there. A man by the name of Flavius Josephus. If you have his works, you know, I've had him for years, and I've read more about him this week than I have the whole time I've had him. I've read different things about it through the years, but not enough. You can get the works of Josephus in one volume. You can get them on eSword. You can get them on your computer for free if you want them. If you want a book, you'll have to pay for it. But this guy becomes he was a Jewish historian, and he becomes, to know him and his record becomes essential to understanding this business about the destruction of Jerusalem. Why? Because Josephus is really the only one that writes about it and gives us the detail about the destruction of Jerusalem. So we are almost entirely dependent upon Flavius Josephus to tell us about this destruction of Jerusalem. If you get his book, the collection of books, he gives there's a short biography of himself, his life, and then he talks about, there's a book called The Antiquities of the Jews, and he gives basically their history going all the way back, Abraham or whatever, I believe, and bringing it all the way forward. So he kind of just rewrites the Old Testament, not just telling about the history of the Jews to those periods. And then he writes the Wars of the Jews. And the wars of the Jews are going to begin basically in the Babylonian captivity and the times in which they deal with the Greeks and after they come out of the Babylonian captivity and the wars that go on, and then the big war that will take place leading in the period between 66 and AD 70, even continuing after that somewhat. He's going to write about the wars of the Jews. Now, I'm going to call him Josephus. That's what everybody refers to him for. But that was not his birth name. His birth name was Yosef ben Matityahu, which means Joseph, the son of Matthias. He was born in Jerusalem around AD 37. So that puts us, he is born somewhere around 9 years, let's just say 8 to 9 years after the day of Pentecost. So in the very city, when Josephus was born in the city of Jerusalem, the church was still very, very much active in that city. Very active in that city. So Christians are everywhere. They're not called Christians during this time period, these early years. Now, he's going to grow up there in Jerusalem. He is born to a high-ranking priestly royal family. His father was a Jewish priest. His mother was of the royal Hasmonean ancestry. The Hasmoneans are the ones that are going to rule during the time between the Testaments. And so he's got royalty in his blood. He's got a priestly lineage. His father is a Jewish priest. So he's born into a wealthy family. He's got privilege, if you will. And there are he writes about this, there are three main sects that exist in Jerusalem at this time. Two of them are mentioned very frequently in the Bible. The other one is not. There's the sect of the Pharisees, the sect of the Sadducees, and the sect of the Essenes. He writes quite a bit about the Essenes. And this is a group that will live in the area surrounding the Dead Sea and kind of the desert region there. They live a very strict life. Some of them do not marry. I think some of them do. But they have a very, very, very strict life and the very strict adherence to the law. We learn a fair amount about their community whenever, what was it, in the 40s, I think, or 50s? 60s. I can't remember the time. Whenever there was, some boy over there throws a stone in the caves around the Dead Sea and hears a crunch and come to find out a whole bunch of clay pots are discovered and a bunch of scrolls of not just the Bible but other writings and books of the Bible. We call them today the Dead Sea Scrolls, and was found in that region. And this was a region where the Essenes were known to be. So he writes about these three sects and he studies them. He learns about them, but he himself will join and become a Pharisee. So Josephus becomes a Pharisee, and he grows up with privilege, he grows up with influence, and apparently probably some charisma, because he is going to, at one point, there are some, I think they were priests who have been imprisoned in Rome, and they send Josephus to Rome to barter, to to talk with them and see if he can mediate and get them released. And so he does. This is during the reign of Nero. And Nero's reign is from... Hey, what happened here? Thanks. Lost it. Well, I put that right there. I'll put it back there again. So Nero is from 54 to 68 CE, the current era that we're in. 54 to 68, which is the same as AD essentially. So he will travel during this time. He will go up to Rome. He will actually gain the graces of Nero's wife. And through her, she will have influence on Nero. And he will actually get these fellows set free. And so he becomes a man, he's very, how can I say, patriotic. He loves his country, loves his people. But he is also a man with ability and means. Well, so a long story short here, in time, there comes, what happens in Jerusalem is there is this, the procurator is the one who controls the region, all right? And he's like the Roman dude that is there to control the region. Well, Josephus writes, and he mentions about the first of all, there was Felix, and then after Felix was Festus. Now those two are mentioned in Scripture. You'll read about them in the book of Acts, Felix and Festus, and he will write about them. There will be one that will follow Festus. And then the guy that follows that person, will be the second one after Festus, is called, I believe his name is Gessius Florus. And he is not a nice guy. He's a bad dude. Doesn't like Jews. Basically, he's got it in for him. He wants to stir up trouble. And long story short, he ends up going into Jerusalem. He does some things that are wrong. He takes money from the temple. This is considered sacred, but he takes quite a large amount of money from the temple. And the Jews, basically, they get up in arms over that. And some Roman soldiers get killed. Basically, he ends up slaughtering 3,600 people in Jerusalem. So this is going to essentially be the start of what's going to be the Wars of the Jews. This is around, I believe, AD 66. And we're going to see this uprising come. And now the Jews are up in arms. Well, Josephus is going to become a general and fight for the Jews. And he is going to be put over the Galileans. And so he's going to be their leader. He's going to lead them into battle or whatever against the Romans. Well, during this time period, what happens to Josephus is he will lead the Galileans in a northern town. We don't see this town in the Bible, but it was a larger city. It's called Jotapata, Jotapata. Some say Jotapata or Jotapata, however you want to say it. But basically, he gets there, he gets holed up, and the Roman legions come. So what's happened at this point is that when there's an uprising of the Jews, and they basically get up in arms, then Nero sends his general, Vespasian, however you want to say that, Vespasian, to come and to take care of this region. And Nero basically has zero tolerance policy. Wipe them out. Because why? The Jews have always been a troublesome people. They're hard. And the problem is their religion. The big thing is with their religion. Some of them, they don't follow the religion. But a lot of problem is with their religion because they don't want to worship idols. They want to worship the God the way that they should be allowed to worship God. And they've gotten privilege from Rome in the past to do that. The Roman emperor has allowed them to do that. But then you always get a guy that comes along and says, no, you're not going to do it. You're going to worship idols. Well, no, we're not. We're not going to worship idols. And, you're going to burn to Caesar. Now, they would offer sacrifices for Caesar, but not to Caesar. And so, at this point, Rome is going to send Vespasian with his legions and they're going to start going from town to town. They're going to go to Caesarea, and they're going to start wiping out people. They're going to start wiping out towns. And basically, there becomes this methodic destruction of towns throughout Jerusalem. So or throughout Judea and throughout this Galilee and throughout this region. So what I want you to see, first of all, is that when we just look at the destruction of Jerusalem, it's not just Jerusalem. The entire region is being wiped out. And so Vespasian, and he has his son Titus. Titus is in his upper 20s, 28 years, 26, 27 years old at this time. And Vespasian is on this campaign to wipe out the Jews. And he will eventually come to Jotapata. And in Jotapata, Josephus is within the city. He's got his people there. And basically the Romans are going to win the day. They're going to take the city. Well, Josephus and about 10 of his guys escape. And they're kind of the last ones. The rest of the people are getting wiped out. Thousands of Jews just killed, slaughtered by the Roman army. Well, they hide out in a cave. And, they got two options. They go surrender to the Romans, or basically they kill themselves. We just die here, or we go surrender to the Romans. Well, most of them don't want to surrender to the Romans. So the story goes, and this is Josephus tells this story. Some people doubt the veracity of it, and that's fine, whatever. But the story he tells is that basically they draw lots, and so what you have is this guy, if you get the low lot, you're the first guy killed. Whoever gets the one next to you, he has to kill you. And then whoever gets the one next to him, he has to kill him. And then you get down to there's only two guys left. All right? And call it whatever you want, divine providence, if the story is true, or if Josephus has called it, whatever. But Josephus is one of the two remaining, okay? I'm getting down to two guys here and one other guy. And he convinces this guy, let's don't do it, okay? And so these guys turn themselves over to the Romans. And Vespasian, he knows about Josephus. Josephus is a name well known. So he's kind of interested to get this guy. He's got a big general. He's captured a big general in the Jewish ranks. But what Josephus does, and call it what you want, but when he comes to Vespasian, he says to Vespasian, hey, he basically says to him, and I'm just paraphrasing, you are Caesar. Because Vespasian says, I'm going to send you to Nero. I'm going to send you to Rome. He said, you are Caesar. I'm your prisoner. And supposedly Josephus has had a dream, and he basically tells Vespasian, you are going to be emperor. You are Caesar. You're emperor. You're going to be emperor. Well, what's going to happen in 68 A.D., I think I got that right. Yeah, the year is, yes, in 68 A.D. Now, Vespasian is still leading armies. This campaign takes 4 years to go through and destroy these people out. These towns hold out. The Jews are fighters. They fight, boy, and they're hard-headed and they're tough. And so they fight. And but what happens is in 68 A.D., 2 years or so before, give or take, before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70, Nero dies. That woman that I told you about, his wife, that Josephus had befriended and became friends with him, he kicked her to death. She was pregnant. He kicked her until he killed her. Nero was a wicked guy, bisexual. He's as wicked as they get. He burned Rome and all that mess. And of course, Peter has died under his persecution. Paul is probably crucified during that time period before 68 because Nero dies in 68 AD. He commits suicide. And when he dies, now there becomes a period of transition. It became what was known as the year of the four emperors. He is going to be followed by another general, Galba. Galba is going to be come into the city, and the army is going to make him king. Basically, he comes into the city. He's got his buddy Otho with him. But when Galba gets to the throne, he doesn't treat Otho right, and so Otho turns on him, and Galba ends up getting killed, and Otho becomes emperor. And that doesn't last out too long. And so another Emperor Vitellius, another general, he becomes an emperor in Rome. And then finally, all this mess is going on at Rome. And Vespasian, and they've got soldiers from other legions that have come into Rome, and they're taking the city of Rome and declaring their general emperor, but they're living high on the hog. because they are sacking Rome. They're taking, getting rid of the other party, so to speak, and they're living good. Well, Vespasian's soldiers are down here having it rough. They're fighting, living out in the field. Things aren't too good for them. And they say, Vespasian, you're emperor. You ought to be the emperor. So Vespasian's army declares him emperor. Long story short, he ends up going back to Rome, and when he does, he leaves his son Titus in charge of the campaign, destroying the Jews and taking them out and finishing that task. He's 29, I think, when this takes place. He's a young man, and he has got several legions under his control. Quite a talented. Titus is also going to be the emperor that will follow Vespasian. Vespasian will come, and he will become emperor, and he will rule for 10 years. And then his son will become emperor. So Vespasian will now be back in Rome, and Titus is leading the armies. And Josephus is with him. Josephus has stayed with him. He becomes a mediator. He tries to convince the Jews. And what happens is as the Roman armies are going through the regions around about Jerusalem, making their way to Jerusalem, what are they doing? Well, people are fleeing some of these cities. Instead of dying, if they can get out of the cities, where are they going to? They're going to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is a citadel. Jerusalem is a heavily defended city. And a city that is made for tens of thousands ends up getting several 100,000 people in it. It gets overcrowded big time. And all kinds of people are fleeing to Jerusalem to dwell out the days there and to be a part of this stand or to be safely. They think they're going to go there and be safe. Well, eventually Titus's armies are going to make its way to Jerusalem. Now, this is a little sense of what Jerusalem would have looked like at this time. This is much sense. It would have extended all the way up into here. So you had the temple, you had the first portion of the city, and then this was added, and then you have this section that was added by the time before AD 70. So you've actually got that Jerusalem is somewhat compartmentalized and in sections, and you have these walls. You have this section, and this section, and each of those sections have walls around it. Now, to try to put some of this together, I'm going to probably jump around a little bit here, but essentially what happens is that Titus brings his armies. He's got, I think, 4 legions. He's got about 60,000 soldiers. I think he's got probably another 20,000 servants hey, somebody's got to cook, and to make war machinery. He sets up a supply line back to the port at Caesarea. And he's got ships coming in there, and he's got a constant supply line coming into Jerusalem, bringing him what he needs. It takes him tons of wheat. I mean, you try feeding 60,000 soldiers plus 20,000 servants. You think about feeding them every day, 80,000 folks. That's a lot of food, all right? That's a lot of food. So he's got supply lines, and it's not just food; it's medical supplies, whatever he's got to have. You got to take care of an army. And who was it? Napoleon said, "An army marches on his stomach." You got to take care of these guys. So here comes he's got the supply line set up, and he surrounds Jerusalem with these 4 legions. Now, what did Jesus say? When you will see Jerusalem compassed with armies, the desolation thereof is nigh. Now, here's what is often not talked about, and Josephus tells us. And I will say this about Josephus. He came to be criticized quite a bit, that he was not an accurate historian, and he was just really, because he writes his record after this. He experienced it. He went through this. He saw the destruction of Jerusalem, and then he will go back he becomes connected to Vespasian, and Vespasian likes him and keeps him around. Why? Because that's the guy that had a dream and told you were going to be emperor. And so actually that's where he gets his name. Flavius was the family name of Vespasian, and so Josephus adopts the family name of the Roman emperor Vespasian. That's how he gets his name, why we call him Josephus. Well, what Josephus is going to do, and these armies come around here, and they've gathered around Jerusalem. Jesus said, when you see a Jerusalem that is compassed about with armies. Now, what's happening though at this time, I want to read you something. The Jews, we look at them and we think, the Jews were destroyed from without. The Romans came in and destroyed them. Can I tell you that the Jews actually destroyed themselves? Because there were seditions and factions. And you had particularly two, there were like three, but two of the primary ones was Simon. One was named Simon, the other was named John. And John controls the temple area in Jerusalem. Simon controls, I think, I forget if it's the northern area, the southern area. And then there was another guy. And there's so much infighting among themselves. They kill each other. All the Romans really had to do was just give them enough time and they would have destroyed each other. I want to read this. It's a statement that Josephus makes. I'd like to read it to you. It comes from the Wars of the Jews, chapter 6. I was reading this today. It was really interesting. Let me see if I can find my place here I want to start. So he talked about Simon. Simon held the upper city, he said. And the great wall as far as Cedron, and as much of the old wall as bent from Siloam to the east. Remember the pool of Siloam down here? Okay, remember that? We studied about that in the Bible in our sermon or series on John. And which went down to the palace of Monobazus, who was king of the Diabini beyond Euphrates. He also held the fountain and the Acra, I'm not sure what that place was, which was no other than the lower city. So he's held the lower city also. He also held all that reached to the palace of Queen Helena, the mother of Monobazus. But John held the temple, and the parts thereto adjoining, for a great way, as also Ophla, and the valley called the valley of Cedron. And when the parts that were interposed between their possessions were burnt by them, they left a space wherein they might fight with each other. For this internal sedition did not cease, even when the Romans were encamped near their very walls. But although they had grown wiser at the first onset the Romans made upon them, this lasted but a while. For they returned to their former madness and separated one from another and fought it out and did everything that the besiegers could desire them to do. For they never suffered anything that was worse from the Romans than they made each other suffer. Nor was there any misery endured by the city after these men's actions that could be esteemed new. But it was most of all unhappy before it was overthrown, while those that took it did it a greater kindness. For I venture to affirm that the sedition destroyed the city, and the Romans destroyed the sedition, which it was a much harder thing to do than to destroy the walls, so that we may justly ascribe our own misfortunes to our own people. Josephus writes and lets it know, and and several times that Titus will have him go, Josephus will stand before the wall and make a big speech trying to get them, surrender, you're mad. The famine becomes so terrible in the city, but they had enough food. They had enough food to last for years. You know what they did? They burnt each other's stores because they were so jealous of each other. So John burns Simon, Simon burns John's, and they have no food. And so they find someone in the city that does have a little food. The guys that are part of these seditions and groups, you see, there are still general people in the city, and some of them have fled there from other places. And they're not party to any one of these seditions. They're not John's crowd. They're not in Simon's crowd. And they brought some food with them. So guess what? These guys that are their fellow Jews that are part of these factions and groups, they go into their houses, they rob them, they take from them their food, kill them, whatever. They kill their own people. They murdered hundreds and hundreds of their own people, just fighting among themselves. So really, when you think about it, there is a city in turmoil. But it was a city, and this is what Josephus will not write, but that we know about. It was a city that had the gospel preached And one of the mightiest revivals that any city has ever known was had in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the birthplace of the church. And here it is in a mess. Seditions. This is how bad it gets. I'll read you the story. Let's see here. Let me find my place. Here we go. Let me read you the story if you'll listen to it. Josephus writes this. He said, I really don't want to talk about how bad it was, but he said, I'm going to tell you this one story. This will give you a sense of how bad it got. He said, now there was a certain woman that dwelt beyond Jordan. Her name was Mary. Her father was Eleazar of the village Bethzub, which signifies the house of hyssop. She was eminent for her family and her wealth, and had fled away to Jerusalem with the rest of the multitude, and was with them besieged therein at this time. The other effects of this woman had been already seized upon, such as she had brought with her out of Perea, and removed to the city. So I remember I tell you that basically Titus has kind of shoved these people where he's taken over their cities, and many of them have fled to Jerusalem, and she's one of those. What she had treasured up besides, as also what food she had contrived to save, had also been carried off by the rapacious guards, who came every day running into her house for that purpose. This put the poor woman into a very great passion. And by the frequent reproaches and imprecations she cast at these rapacious villains, she had provoked them to anger against her. In other words, basically, she's just fussing them out. But none of them, either out of the indignation she had raised against herself or out of the commiseration of her case, would take away her life. So in other words, they would rob her, but they wouldn't kill her. And if she found any food, she perceived her labors were for others and not for herself. And it was now become impossible for her in any way to find any more food, while the famine pierced through her very bowels and marrow, when also her passion was fired to a degree beyond the famine itself, nor did she consult with anything but with her passion and the necessity she was in. Do you remember what Jesus told them? Go back. Right here. He said, you will see Jerusalem compassed with armies, the desolations thereof is nigh. If you're in Judea, go to the mountains. Don't go to Jerusalem. If you're in Jerusalem, get out. And if you're in the countries around it, don't go to Jerusalem. If you were a Christian and you knew this, you didn't even go into Jerusalem. Okay? Many Christians who were in surrounding regions never even went to Jerusalem. They stayed away. But watch this. Woe unto them that are with child. I haven't finished my story. And to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress. The word distress means necessity. There will be great necessity in the land. And this woman portrays this. She then attempted a most unnatural thing. And snatching up her son, who was a child sucking at her breast, she said, O thou miserable infant, for whom shall I preserve thee in this war, this famine, and this sedition? As to the war with the Romans, if they preserve our lives, we must be slaves. This famine also will destroy us, even before that slavery comes upon us. Yet are these seditious rogues more terrible than both the other. Come on, be thou my food, and be thou a fury to these seditious varlets, and a byword to the world, which is all that is now, wanting to complete the calamities of us Jews. As soon as she had said this, she slew her son, and then roasted him, and ate the one half of him, and kept the other half by her concealed. Upon this, the seditious came in presently, and smelling the horrid scent of this food, they threatened her that they would cut her throat immediately if she did not show them what food she had gotten ready. She replied that she had saved a very fine portion of it for them, and withal uncovered what was left of her son. Hereupon they were seized with a horror and amazement of mind, and stood astonished at the sight. When she said to them, This is mine own son, and what hath been done was mine own doing. Come, eat of this food, for I have eaten of it myself. Do not you pretend to be either more tender than a woman, or more compassionate than a mother? But if you be so scrupulous, and do abominate this my sacrifice, as I have eaten the one half, let the rest be reserved for me also. After which those men went out trembling, being never so much affrighted at anything as they were at this. And with some difficulty they left the rest of that meat to the mother. Upon which the whole city was full of horrid action immediately. And while everybody laid this miserable case before their own eyes, they trembled, as if this unheard of action had been done by themselves. So those that were thus distressed by the famine were very desirous to die, and those already dead were esteemed happy, because they had not lived long enough either to hear or see such miseries. Now, prior to this, exactly what woe to them that were a child and give suck. It's exactly what happened in the city. It became horrible. And Jesus had warned them, when Jerusalem's compassed with armies, don't go to Jerusalem. If you're in it, get out. Now, Titus at one point is going to let people leave the city. But the seditions, John's crowd and Simon's crowd, they don't want him to leave the city, but they're going to let him leave, but they're not going to let him leave with any money. So they do something interesting, because they're going to keep their stuff. They're going to basically, they got to leave without anything. So they leave, they sell what they have, they get rid of their possessions, and they have some gold coins. And before they leave, Titus is going to allow them to go out into the countryside and leave with free. And so they swallow the gold coins. And later on, they went to the restroom and retrieved the gold coins. And was able to at least supply themselves some food, because they got out of the famine that was in the city. So Titus starts tightening the net. He did an amazing feat. He takes these men, his 60,000 man army, and all this time the Jews are fighting. They're trying to, the Romans are building siege engines, battering rams, and things that throw arrows and whatever, stones. They said the stones were just terrible. They were throwing these catapults that would catapult stones. And at first they would stand on the walls of the city and says, the stone's coming. And they could see it coming. So it was a white stone. And so the Romans went to painting the stones black, and they couldn't see them. And the people were destroyed with stones. They would come but at all this time, the Jews are fighting as well. They're fighting against, they will go out, make excursions out of the city against the Romans, back into the city. Romans will die through this period. But he continues to build siege ramps up to the city. And then he does something. He makes this city, he's going to contain it. And he does something very, I don't want to call it strange, but he does a feat. He gets this done in 2 weeks. He will build, in 2 weeks, he will build an entire wall around this city. He's got his 4 legions, but he puts them all to work, and he builds that wall. He shuts them in. Nobody leaves. At nighttime, any of the people of the city, if they leave to try to get out and just find some food outside the city, he captures them. He puts them on crosses. As many as 500 people a day hanging on crosses outside of the city of Jerusalem. He does that so the Jews inside can see what's going on. Hopefully they will surrender and give up, but they are too stubborn and they will not. And eventually he takes the city. He breaks through. He takes the city. He will, of course, it will be, people will be slaughtered. Blood will run, and he will kill them. There are several that will be taken slaves, just as the Lord said. They'll be sold. They'll be sold to other nations. They'll become slaves and scattered throughout various people. A lot of them will die. Others will become slaves. And the result of it is, of course, the temple will burn. It's going to catch fire, and the temple's going to burn. Titus really did not want to do that. He really did not want to destroy the city. But again, they were too hard-headed, and they didn't want to give up, and so they didn't. And the thing is they killed each other. So when the temple burns, the gold from the dome is going to melt and run down in between the stones. And when that happens, the Roman soldiers will pry the stones apart. And that's where Jesus said not one stone will be left on another. They pry all the stones apart to get the gold that ran down between the stones. Josephus was there to witness it. He saw the destruction of Jerusalem. And Jesus gives it in some form, but everything that Jesus said came to pass. Why was this city judged so harshly? Because this city as a whole was unrepentant of crucifying the Lord of glory. And God was patient. God gave them grace. He gave them Pentecost. He gave them preachers. He gave them people to share the gospel with them. And what did they do? They martyred him. He himself had stood outside the city before he entered it and wept over the city and said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that slayest the prophets, how oft would I have taken thee under my wings, but thou wouldest not. And so he said, you don't even know the time of your own destruction. So the sign, the Lord answers the question. The sign is when the armies encamp around Jerusalem. You know that the desolation, not just the city, but the temple also. The temple and the city will be destroyed. And he said, they said, well, when will it be? Well, he doesn't give them a year. He doesn't say AD 70. He doesn't give them a year. He just gives them a sign, and he gives them other things that they need to focus on. Wars are going to continue. The city is going down, and guess what? There's going to still be deception. There's going to be wars after that. There's going to be persecution. There's going to be natural disasters in the world. And get ready, fellas. This is what's going to come prior to the coming of Jesus Christ. The King has come. The King of peace has come. The Lord has entered into Jerusalem. And Jerusalem has cried, oh, King of Israel. And then within 40 years, they're fighting and they're going to be wiped out. It was not really Rome as much as it was the judgment of God Almighty against a city that had rebelled against His Word.
Brother Woods, does Josephus credit the burning of the city to be that of the Jews themselves, or was it the Romans that burned the temple where it started?
I'm not sure, and I'm trying to think, brother. I don't know that they even, how that thing got started. It's kind of like that in the American Revolution. Who fired the first shot? Was it one of us? Was it one of them? It was one of them things inevitable that's going to happen. Well, he didn't want to destroy the city. He gave them opportunities to submit and to surrender. He didn't really want to destroy, just for posterity's sake. He didn't want to destroy the city. Not only that, I mean, Jews typically are wealthy people. And it's a tax base. You're killing your tax base, man. But you're the empire. You got to put these folks down. You can't let a rebellion come up like this, or others are going to rebel in your empire. You've got to shut this stuff down if you're going to keep your empire going. But you know, I think there's some sense of history involved, but I don't think he wants to destroy the tax base either. And so if the people are there and they're contented, it looks better on Roman rule if you've got contented subjects paying good taxes. It looks bad if they're in rebellion and you've had to kill a bunch of them. That doesn't look good on you. Doesn't look good on your leadership. So he's tried. But, buddy, they were bent. Their hearts were hard and they were bent. Any other questions? We're going to close here tonight.
I was wondering about the scene that Pilate washing his hands, and those Jews said, let the blood be on us.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about the vengeance of God.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come to its fullness, the time of it done. And to hear how they turn on each other in the Old Testament, there's a lot of similar events of pagan nations warring against Israel. And God will bring them into confusion if they almost turn. That's a vengeance of God.
Yes. If the Jews had not fought among themselves, hadn't burned each other's supplies, they'd have had enough. They could have probably at least beaten the Roman army enough to say, give us our independence, or no more coming in here and bringing your soldiers and defiling our temple and defiling what we do. But what killed them was infighting. Destroyed them. Yes, sir.
Well, what was the infighting about? Jealousy about
Control.
you've got more than I've got.
Yeah, and just I want to be top dog. I want to be leader, and I got my group following me, and I should be the one over it all. No, you're not going to be the one over it all. My guys are not going to follow you, and well, my guys aren't going to follow you. So it's that kind of jealousy and envy among themselves. The Jews have been, well, they've kind of had that for. They've always had some of that mess. I mean, within them, this jealousy. I mean, with Christ, the Jews were jealous over Jesus Christ, right? They delivered him up. Pilate said he knew they delivered him up for envy. I mean, here's one of their own. Here's one of their own prophets, Jesus Christ. And what bad is he doing? I mean, tell me what bad Jesus is doing. He's healing people. He's cleansing lepers. He's broadening your tax base, all right? He's giving you more workers. He's opening blinded eyes. I mean, how's that harmful to your country? I mean, how's that going to hurt you? And yet, what do? Kill him. Jealousy was a big problem among Jewish people.
Well, you can see really, I mean, why Israel has always had so many problems, suffered so much through the years, always in wars. Just look at what you just told us.
Yeah.
Look at the way they are when they were.
Yep. And this will be the second time the city is destroyed. It was destroyed by the Babylonians, rebuilt and destroyed the second time. And well, guess what? It's got another bloodbath coming. Tribulation's around the corner, and Jerusalem's going to have that temple's going to be rebuilt. And it's going to be defiled by the Antichrist, and there's going to be another bloodbath in Jerusalem. And Christ is going to come and fight a war, and some are going to be saved. But I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of Jews that follow the Antichrist, and Christ is going to come and wipe them out. The battle was fought in the Valley of Megiddo outside, north of the city of Jerusalem. Okay? Any other questions, comments? All right, we do not have study next week, but we will pick up on this place with the latter part of the signs and some lessons from Luke 21 in our next study, which will be in 2 weeks from tonight, God willing.
Hey, Brother Woods, could you put that map back up there?
Oh,
I want to take a picture. If that's all right.
there you,
Yeah, there it is.
there you go.
I always inquired about the women that give sleep.
You know what? I think someone tried to call me. Peter, you be careful going home, buddy. Don't let them four-legged critters come out there.